Good evening. I'm Peggy LaFrance of Champaign County NAACP. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, NAACP, and the News-Gazette, I welcome you to tonight's candidate forum. Tonight's first forum is for candidates Democrat Betsy Dirksen Londrigan and Stefanie Smith. I will be the moderator for this forum. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement. I will then ask questions submitted by the audience, and candidates will each have 1 minute to answer these questions. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Candidates will kindly refrain from any negative attacks on the other candidate, will not mention the other candidate by name, and will speak only to what they plan to do if elected to office. For you in the audience, we hope that you have questions for the candidates. There are people distributing and collecting cards. For your questions, please raise your hands if you need a card. Shall we begin? By an earlier coin toss, Ms. Stefanie Smith won, so we'll start with Stefanie.
This is not a message for those of you fighting for your lives in this broken system. This is a message for Right. I'm new here. This is not a message for those of you fighting for your lives in this broken system. This is a message for the complicit. You don't get to abuse us without a reckoning. I'm exercising my no. I do not consent to this violence. You are blue no matter whoing people to literal death sentences at the hands of the state. Negligence is violence, poverty is violence, and state-sanctioned rape, torture, and murder are still rape, torture, and murder. Call it naivete if you want, but I didn't realize until I entered this race that the simple act of acknowledging bipartisan complicity in Trump's bloated defense budget, as well as expanded powers of censorship and surveillance, would result in censorship from the local county Democrats. They stripped everyone's website links because of my anti-imperialist stance. It's an act of suppression. It's an abuse of power that undermines trust. It's undemocratic, and we aren't going to meaningfully oppose tyranny by avoiding accountability. Local organizations that claim to be fighting for justice for immigrants choose to spend thousands of dollars investing in a pro-ICE candidate. Given that members of one of these organizations created an all-out attack this past year on our trans community, coming to the defense of someone with genocidal ideologies and a far-right backing from outlets like Breitbart, and that this echoes the events that led up to the Holocaust. The Holocaust is queer history, too, I might add. I can no longer afford to give people the benefit of the doubt on these matters. This is complicity in a time when we need a bold commitment to justice. I'm going to proactively state questions about working with Republicans legitimize fascism. At the federal level, the government's checks and balances have been rendered impotent. This is an authoritarian regime, and we have a moral obligation to overthrow a dictator. Stop legitimizing white supremacy in the name of civility and respectability. When you do this, you prove yourself incompetent at governing us. You create and validate oppression. The boldest act of resistance you can offer is simple: step aside. Thank you.
Next, we have Betsy.
I'm Betsy Dirksen Londrigan, and I'm sorry. I'm Betsy Dirksen Londrigan, and I'm running for Congress here in the Illinois 13th Congressional District. I want to say thank you to the NAACP, League of Women Voters, and the News-Gazette for having this tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity. You know, I got into this race in 2017, and the reason I got into this race was very personal. It continues to be. It's because of health care. My son Jack was bit by a tick when he was 12 years old, and he ended up in the pediatric intensive care unit of our children's hospital for 24 days. He was put onto a ventilator after surgery. He was put into a medically induced coma. He was read last rites not once, but twice. And for us and for our family, we know how incredibly fortunate we are that we got our boy back and that we had excellent medical care that saved his life. We are also extremely fortunate that we had really good insurance, because without that insurance, our family would have gone bankrupt. So for me, when I saw Rodney Davis celebrating on the White House lawn that they had passed a bill that would cause millions of people to lose their insurance, I thought to myself, either they don't know or they don't care what this is going to do to families. I do know, and I do care. And I don't think that there's anybody who could bring more passion to that fight than me. I got into this race to stand up for our health care. And we spread that message. I put, I think, 63,000 miles on my car, getting around 14 counties, 5,400 square mile district. And we talked about health care and jobs and education. We built this amazing grassroots army of over 2,000 volunteers across the district. And we came so close in 2018 to flipping this seat. We came within less than 1%. So I am back in this race because we have a mission. We have to finish what we started. We have a representative who continues to vote against us. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Thank you.
Ms. Londrigan, why are you qualified to be a member of Congress?
This is my home. This is where I am born and raised. My entire life is invested here. I have built a family, a life, and been part of this community for decades. We are missing a voice in Washington, and it's the voice of people throughout the 13th district. We have a representative who votes against our best interests. We have somebody who votes against lowering the cost of prescription drugs, who votes against Climate Action Now, who votes against universal background checks, who votes against the Equality Act, who votes against protecting people with pre-existing conditions. We deserve a representative who is going to listen to the 14 counties in the 13th district and take our voice to Congress. Because when I go to Congress, we all go to Congress.
Ms. Smith, why are you qualified to be a member of Congress?
I believe that everyone in this room is probably qualified for that job, given what we are seeing in the level of federal government. So what makes me unique is that I have lived experience with gut-wrenching poverty and all that that entails. It has haunted me my entire life. I understand systemic abuses because I have survived them. What I bring to the table is a survivor-centered, trauma-informed approach that will always prioritize the most vulnerable members of our community.
Ms. Smith, what can you do in the U.S. Congress that will directly impact your constituents in Champaign County?
That question got a lot harder to answer this past week, quite frankly. This is for a House seat. The House has been passing bills, right? For the last few years, they've passed many bills, and they're sitting in the Senate. So from my seat in Congress, I would continue to fight for legislation like Medicare for All, single-payer health care. I would fight for the Green New Deal. I would fight for the Homes Guarantee. I would fight for survivor-informed practices throughout our criminal justice system and fight for reforms all over the place. Honestly, it's such a mess. It's such a mess. I would abolish ICE. I would work to abolish ICE. But I need the support of the Senate. We have to actually have a Senate that is willing to legislate if we actually want to pass legislation.
Ms. Londrigan, will you answer the question, please?
Certainly. So in Congress, there's a lot of things that we can do to lower the cost of prescription drugs, to make sure our kids get an education, to make sure that through any policy that we're looking at it through the prism of the climate crisis. Those are all things that we can do when we get there. But the reality of what we can do on the ground here, we're already doing it. And that happens now. You know, in 2018, we used our resources to make sure that we were working with Democrats up and down the ballot to organize, to get people registered to vote, to get the voters to the polls. And because we did that, we were all able to flip everything in Champaign County. And for the first time in our history, Champaign County and the students at the University of Illinois and the communities of color here are going to have access to the polls. No more 4-hour lines, no more trying to find your polling location. We have a county clerk dedicated to access to the polls.
Ms. Londrigan, if elected, what is one thing you would like to accomplish and how long will it take?
The first thing, a first priority has got to be protecting health care through protecting the ACA and the protections that come with it, things like protecting people with pre-existing conditions from being discriminated against. And we've got to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Now, we are facing a representative in Congress right now who just voted again against lowering the cost of prescription drugs. We have a member of Congress right now who has written in support of a case making its way through the court that will absolutely overturn the ACA, and all of those protections go with it. Making sure that we protect the ACA, making sure that we lower the cost of prescription drugs by passing good legislation where Medicare can negotiate for drug prices, just like the legislation that Rodney Davis just voted against. Those are things that will make immediate impact on people in the 13th District.
Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith, would you please answer the question?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm with you. First and foremost, we have not just children and adults being tortured and slaughtered in concentration camps, but we also have citizens sitting in jails who have not been charged with crimes that can't afford to get out of jail. That's absolutely ludicrous. So first and foremost, I would work to uncage people because that is the moral thing to do. With the money we save from that, because it's big business, we could actually shift those funds to policies that would create healthier communities, more resilient communities. We could fund healthcare. We could address the climate crisis. We could actually look forward to a future together. Thank you.
Ms. Smith, do you support changes to the election system like ranked choice voting? Do you support abolishing the Electoral College?
Yes and yes.
I like the idea of ranked choice voting, and I think we've all seen what the Electoral College is up to, so yes.
Okay. Ms. Londrigan, with poverty hovering over 20% in Champaign County, why do you think that poverty exists in such a rich country, and why is it so common in this district? What will you do to make sure everyone has enough?
The income inequality is at a historic high right now. And I can tell you that the tax scam that Rodney Davis was the face of in 2017 has only made it worse. You know, when they passed that tax bill, he went around and he told everybody that this was for the middle class. It was for working families. We knew that wasn't true. We said it wasn't true. It's not true. That over 85% of that benefit went to the top 1%. Corporations did exactly what we knew they were going to do: corporate buybacks and dividends. That money didn't get invested back into the middle class. I think that any tax bill that we pass that I would support has to focus on building the middle class, to lift people out of poverty. We have to do that also by addressing issues like food insecurity and affordable housing. And I want you to look at the budget that Trump just put out today, because all of those things are at risk.
Ms. Smith?
Piggybacking off of the budget, we are looking at a proposed budget that would cut over $1 trillion from Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. That was recently proposed. We have already seen our federal safety nets eradicated. So we need to address our social safety systems immediately, and not just on the federal level, locally as well. Given my work in the community, it is very, very bleak here. I support the Homes Guarantee policy, which would help with affordable housing. It addresses issues like environmental racism. It also addresses infrastructure, disaster preparedness in the face of climate change. This is an issue that's very, very important in poor communities because a lot of these people live in mobile homes, which are more susceptible to storms, or apartment buildings, and they might not have insurance if disaster were to strike. We need a robust shelter and disaster system throughout the nation if we are actually going to survive this climate crisis. The poor are unfortunately feeling the effects of this climate crisis more than anyone else. So addressing poverty is a life or death issue for many, many, many of us in the district.
Ms. Smith, agriculture is a big industry in Champaign County. President Trump has declared tariffs on many Chinese products, and China in return imposed tariffs on American agricultural products. This has harmed farmers. What will you do about this if you were in Congress?
I think that one of the things that we have seen in the farming industry is we've seen a lot of big business come in and push out small farmers, right? Like it's very, very corporate now. And we don't have sustainable farming practices. So I believe that when we address the issues that are affecting the farming industry, we need to look forward to the future. We need to look to sustainable crops. We need to look at bringing in industry like the hemp industry, for example. Decatur has infrastructure that would be great for that. And so I think that when it comes to supporting farmers, we obviously know that Trump's trade agreements aren't working out for the small farmers. We need to focus on what the future is going to look like and how farmers can have security, again, as we weather the climate crisis and its effects on our food supply.
Ms. Londrigan?
You know, between the historic flooding and the tariffs, our farmers and our rural communities are suffering. And it's important to note that it's not just the farmers who are suffering. It's the communities around them, because they're the linchpins in our circle of life here in the 13th district. We do have mostly family farms in our district, and they are not the ones who benefited from that bailout. So they're not doing things like in making investments in better equipment. They can't afford to upgrade where they should. So it's really important that we promote healthy farms. And it's important to have a member of Congress who stands up for people in the district. He sits on the Ag Committee, and yet when it comes to funding for things like the Conservation Stewardship Program, which promotes good environmental practices with our farmers, things like cover crops, he watches that money go to high irrigation states like Texas and Colorado instead of standing up for our farmers. We need to have someone who represents the 13th.
Ms. Londrigan, do you support the United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement that was otherwise known as NAFTA 2.0? Please explain your answer.
Sure. I do support in the format that it ultimately was passed. I know that there's still some issues with it, but the agreement that Congressman Davis was talking about for months did not have environmental standard enforcement, did not have labor enforcement. And so I really credit the Democrats with cleaning that agreement up, putting those enforcements in place for labor, for the environment, and also the version that he was supporting allowed for pharmaceutical companies to keep their drug prices insanely high. Democrats said no to that too. So in its current format, yes, because it does have those good enforcement mechanisms, it has funding for those enforcement mechanisms, and it's important for our farmers in the district to have that kind of security with Mexico and Canada because they're such important trade partners.
Ms. Smith.
I do not support it. There are many unions that have outlined very, very robust criticism of it, and I'm not going to rehash that. I will talk about my personal complaint, which is that it stripped protections for discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender, and I'm a big fan of keeping my big gay civil rights, so I will not support trade agreements like this.
Ms. Smith, are you in favor of regulation of giant tech companies like Facebook and Google? If so, what kind of regulation?
Yes, I absolutely am in favor of regulation. We need to democratize the internet again. We should not have companies that are able to collect data on us, keep files on us, sell our data, give our data to law enforcement like that. I am very, very opposed to censorship and surveillance, and these issues are closely linked when we talk about major tech companies like Google and Facebook. The sort of disinformation and the spread of toxic ideology going unchecked is horrifying and has undermined our democracy. So I'm in favor of sweeping regulations when it comes to giant tech companies. This is no way for us to live. Facebook just should not know everything about me. Yeah.
Ms. Londrigan.
I agree that we have to have regulations in place, that these companies have breached the trust of people across the world, that our data is ours, our personal information is ours, and we should be the only arbiters of what we share. And in terms of regulations for things like political advertisements, there are already very strict rules when you are putting an advertisement on regular television. The FCC has had those rules in place for a long time. There is no reason, and I don't believe that when Facebook or anybody, when they say that that causes an undue burden on them, because networks have been abiding by those rules for a long time. And I think that social media platforms should have to abide by the same rules.
Ms. Londrigan, under our Constitution, only Congress has the right to declare war, but we have been in continuous war since 2002. Based on the 2002 Congressional resolution authorizing force against Iraq, what do you think Congress should do about this?
Congress has got to bring that decision-making power back to the Congress so that it's not in the hands of one president, so that it is back at the House of Representatives, the representatives of the people, where any time that we are going to commit money or forces, that there is an open debate, that people can weigh in, because that's what we're supposed to do as a democracy. And the problem with that authorization of the use of military force is that it's outdated. And they have used it to create wars, to offer military support, in ways that that were never conceived back in 2002. It's got to be updated, and all those powers need to come back. I know a lot of people in Congress may not want it to come back because they don't want to have to be the ones to have those discussions and take those votes, yay or nay, but that's why they were elected. They are the representative of the people, and they need to act like it.
Ms. Smith.
I will not fund exorbitant defense budgets ever. I will not allow, I will never use my voice to support war, period, full stop. I believe in the human rights of everyone.
Ms. Smith, members of the Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations are responsible for what many believe were war crimes in the Mideast if they were tried by the standards of the post-World War II Nuremberg Tribunal. As a member of Congress, would you support the withdrawal of all U.S. troops and weapons from the Mideast?
Yes.
Ms. Londrigan.
I think to make a blanket statement about abandoning our allies would be a dangerous statement to make. I think there has to be a thoughtful withdrawal of our troops across the world, across the Middle East, while making sure that we aren't leaving people in a more dangerous circumstance than we found them, and that we're not leaving them to fend for themselves when they can't, or that we are giving rise to more terrorist organizations. So I think anything that we do in that respect has to be done thoughtfully.
Thank you. Ms. Londrigan. Ms. Londrigan, there are tens of millions of people in this country who are uninsured, underinsured, who cannot afford their medication, who go bankrupt thinking they can afford to pay for their medication, and who suffer from our present healthcare system. Under Senator Sanders' plan for Medicare for All, much of this pain could be stopped by eliminating co-pays, premiums, and deductibles for all in exchange for a small tax increase on those making more than $29,000. Under this plan, everyone would have health care access. Like in every other major country, tens of millions of people in this country could, for the first time, access the care needed without fear of bankruptcy. Candidates, do you support Medicare for All? If not, how do you plan to address our broken health care system?
Look, the whole reason I got into this race in the first place is to protect health care. Because I don't want anyone to lose someone that they love because they can't get to a doctor, or they can't afford their doctor's visit, or they can't afford their prescription drugs, or God forbid they face bankruptcy because of one medical emergency. We're better than that. My priority is to make sure that in the 13th district that we have a voice in Congress who is standing up to protect our health care. We've got to make sure that those protections that come with the ACA stay in place. We've got to make sure that prescription drug costs are lowered. That means voting for things like H.R. 3. Rodney Davis just voted against that again. We are up against a representative who has voted to repeal the ACA 11 times, who has voted against lowering the cost of prescription drugs and against protecting people with pre-existing conditions. That's where our fight is.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I'd like to ask the audience to refrain from comments. It's going to shorten our time for questions.
Ms. Smith.
I lost my mother to cancer because she couldn't afford to go to the doctor. She had headaches for years that she just treated with aspirin over the counter. On Valentine's Day, she was diagnosed with brain tumors, likely the result of environmental pollutions from living out on a farm. Within 6 weeks, she was dead. Anything less than single payer is eugenics.
If you do not support Medicare for all, how would you change the Affordable Care Act?
I support Medicare for all.
Look, I have a problem forcing people to give up insurance that they want to keep. In our district, what I hear from people across the district is that they're paying too much for what they have. They like what they have, but they're paying too much for it. So how do we bring the costs down? Well, one option, we can introduce Medicare as a public option, and we can start it in our rural communities and with our small business owners. Because our rural communities have lost providers. There is no competition driving those prices down. That will be very helpful in those communities to bring in that competition to lower their costs, their out-of-pocket costs, and their premiums. And as far as prescription drugs go, we have a bill in Congress, and it passed. And it was to allow Medicare to use the power of Medicare to negotiate for drug prices to bring those costs down. It would save our country, I think, $450 billion. That is dispersed between everybody in our nation to lower the drug costs. Those are real things that we can do now.
Ms. Londrigan, the House passed H.R. 3, Lower Drugs Costs
Yep.
Now Act, but is not being called in the Senate. House Republicans have introduced H.R. 19, Lower Costs, More Cures Act. Are there possibilities for compromise to reduce the cost of prescriptions?
Here's the thing. We have got to unleash the power of Medicare. It's the largest purchaser of prescription drugs in the nation. We have to use that power to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. Now, if what the Republicans will tell you, and what Rodney Davis will tell you, is that means that we're not going to have innovation in drugs. That is incorrect, because H.R. 3, in addition to lowering the cost of prescription drugs, specifically funds the National Institute for Health to try to encourage more research into new and effective drugs. So no, we have to unleash the power of Medicare to negotiate for drug prices. We can keep the innovation going, and we can save people's lives. That's the bottom line.
Ms. Smith, will you answer the question, please?
Yes, I've already stated anything less than single payer is eugenics. So that would cover prescription drugs. So I'm just going to throw in another issue. Maybe we should actually get some people hired at the CDC. Trump actually completely got rid of our pandemic response team in 2018. He didn't like it because Obama made it. Super petty. Can we please work on that, like really, really soon?
Ms. Smith, do you support the Equal Justice for All Act, HB 3347? How much do we need to do an end to mass incarceration? Do you support the Equal Justice for All Act, HB 3347? How much do we need to do to end mass incarceration?
I have not read that entire policy, and I have promised that I will not run my mouth on policies that I don't have a good handle on and that I can't critically engage with. But I think that I've made it very, very clear that I am for wide-scale criminal justice reform. I am for prison abolition in general.
Ms. Londrigan.
I think when we're talking about mass incarceration, we have to talk about the legalization of marijuana. and that it needs to be done at the federal level and needs to be done in a thoughtful way. What we've seen in Illinois, we've seen some good things already with record expungements. But I want to make sure that we're going slow on issues like that, because there has to be a social equity component that needs to lead that effort. We still have a lot of people who are incarcerated for marijuana-related charges. It needs to be descheduled so we can study it. It needs to be descheduled for decriminalization. And we need to make sure that as we do this, that we are bringing the communities of color that were disproportionately affected by it the benefits of the legalization.
Ms. Londrigan, will you take donations from the fossil fuel industry?
Now, I'm not taking any corporate PAC money, and I am very proud to be endorsed by End Citizens United, because we've got to get the corporate PAC money and special interest groups out of politics. Now, when we look at somebody like Rodney Davis, who has literally taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from big pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, we know exactly why he votes against health care reform. We know exactly why he votes against lowering the cost of prescription drugs. We need to make sure that we have a representative in Congress who is not beholden to anybody but the people in the 13th district. That's why I am very proud that I have not taken any corporate PAC money, will never take any corporate PAC money, so that when I go to Congress, you know exactly who I'm working for, and it's you.
Ms. Smith?
No, I will not take fossil fuel money. Thank you.
Ms. Smith, would you vote for the Green New Deal?
Yes.
Ms. Londrigan?
Well, there's a lot of really good legislation out there that is very climate forward. And so, for me, I look at my kids and my grandkids to be someday, and I want to make sure that we're giving them a livable world, and that I think we all share the belief that clean air, clean water, and clean land are human rights. And I don't think that we can overstate the urgency of the climate crisis right now. So one thing that I want to do as soon as I get to Congress is tell them that I want to be on the select committee for the climate crisis, because that's something I'm really proud of that the freshmen who were elected in 2018 really pushed for, because it looks at every policy through the prism of this climate crisis. Another thing that we're going to have to look at is we're going to have to look at all of these regulations that have been rolled back by this administration. We're going to have to look at the programs that have gone by the wayside for lack of funding. And again, go back to the budget that was released today. The deepest cuts are reserved for the EPA.
Ms. Londrigan, would you support full student loan forgiveness for the $1.6 trillion of student loan debt?
I believe that if you can afford to pay for college, then you should pay for college. If you can afford your student loans, then you should pay for your student loans. I believe that there needs to be student loan forgiveness for people who have gone into public service. That's what they were promised. And it hasn't happened because that program isn't working the way it should. I believe that for-profit colleges have got to pay for what they did, and that people who were scammed by those for-profit colleges should absolutely have full restitution made, and their loans should be forgiven. Student loan forgiveness is only part of the problem. We really have to go to the front side of things, and we have to address college affordability. And we have to do those things by having a representative who believes in things like Pell Grants, income share agreements, and working with the state and federal governments to make tuition-free community college.
Tuition costs have not risen at the same rate as inflation. They are over 1,000% higher than they were just a few decades ago, and our wages remain stagnant. Entry-level jobs do not pay living wages anymore, even if you have a college degree. That's theft. I'm absolutely for student loan forgiveness for everyone. Thank you.
Ms. Smith, will you fully support your opponent if you lose?
Fully support them in what?
In the election?
Why would that be your business? That's not an appropriate question to ask somebody who they vote for. That's private. Thank you.
Ms. Londrigan?
I would absolutely support my opponent. And it's actually something I feel really strongly about. I'm a co-founder of a group called Women Rising, and I work with a group of women in Springfield, Illinois, where I'm from. And our mission is to recruit, support, and elect progressive women to local offices. And it's been something that I've been committed to for a long time. And in fact, in 2019, we had our best year yet. We had 14 women that we worked with and that ran for office, and 10 of them got elected. That was historic for us in Sangamon County. And so I think that pulling together as Democrats, as we are looking at 2020, my hope is that everybody, no matter who you're supporting in the primary and any primary, that when the time comes, that we all work together, because I want to wake up on November 4th with a Democrat for president.
Ms. Londrigan, the House recently passed the PRO Act. This legislation protected unions' rights to organize. Representative Davis voted against the bill. How would you support unions in Congress?
I'm really happy that somebody brought that up, because I am very proud to be supported by unions like the electrical workers and Teamsters and the steel workers and AFT and AFSCME, because I believe that the right to organize, that the right to stand together, that workers' rights are what has made our middle class and what is going to bring back our middle class. So would I support the PRO Act? Absolutely. When you elect me, you are electing a pro-union, pro-worker, pro-organizer, pro-collective bargaining Democrat, because I want to make sure that anything that we do here in Illinois, that we use union labor and that we are union forward in everything we do. And I want to take that to the federal government. We deserve that. Our unions deserve that. Our workers deserve that. Our families deserve that.
I'm working class. I'm not middle class. I have never held a job where I had the opportunity to be in a union. I've worked predominantly in food service. I have worked in strip clubs. I have suffered egregious violations to my human rights and my labor rights at work in ways that still haunt me today. I am a firm supporter of worker rights on every level. And as I have stated previously, my focus will always be on uplifting the most vulnerable members of our community. And that means ensuring that people have the right to unionize, that we don't have independent contractor status as a predatory way for employers to get around labor rights. I will support any and all legislation that bolsters the rights of workers.
Unfortunately, we are not able to get to all of the questions. This will be our last question. This is for Ms. Smith. What is the most important issue facing Congress? How would you address it?
The most important issue facing Congress is the most important issue facing us all. It's the fact that our democracy is crumbling right before our eyes. It's that our powers of checks and balances have been rendered impotent. I don't know how to correct that. I don't think that anybody has an answer for that. This is unprecedented in American history. So what I propose is that we collaborate, we work together, and we figure this out. We have to overthrow a dictator.
Ms. Londrigan.
I think there's several really important issues before Congress right now. It is about protecting our health care. It's about lowering the cost of prescription drugs. It's about keeping our kids safe. It's about the right to organize. It's about making sure that communities that have been, that our LGBTQ community isn't discriminated against. It's about rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. It's about having a voice from the 13th District at the table who actually reflects the people in the 13th District. When I go to Congress, I will be a voice for our constituency. We have 14 counties in the 13th District, and we could focus on the differences even between these 14 counties, but the bottom line is we all need health care. We all need a livable world. We all love our kids. We want them to have a good education, and we want an economy that might bring them back home.
Mic check! Mic check! Mic check! Medicare for all! Medicare for all! Okay, guys. Medicare for all! You're being heard! Be quiet. Medicare for all! 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 Medicare for all!
Would you people please leave the room?
Medicare for all!
Would you people
Medicare
please
for
leave
all!
the room?
Medicare for all! Medicare
Please
for all!
leave the room!
Medicare for all! Medicare for all! What do we want? What do we want it? What do we want? More debate! When do we want it now? What do we want? More debate! When do we want it now?
No, Stefanie.
Okay, we will now hear closing.
Are you all awake?
We will now hear closing from Stefanie Smith.
I want to share a passage from Hannah Arendt's Origins of Totalitarianism. In an ever-changing, incomprehensible world, the masses had reached the point where they would, at the same time, believe everything and nothing, think that everything was possible and that nothing was true. Mass propaganda discovered that its audience was ready at all times to believe the worst, no matter how absurd, and did not particularly object to being deceived because it held every statement to be a lie anyhow. The totalitarian mass leaders based their propaganda on the correct psychological assumption that, under such conditions, one could make people believe the most fantastic statements one day and trust that if the next day they were given irrefutable proof of their falsehoods, they would take refuge in cynicism. Instead of deserting the leaders who had lied to them, they would protest that they had known all along that the statement was a lie and would admire the leaders for their superior tactical cleverness. She would later write, "The sad truth is that most evil is done by people who never make up their minds to be good or evil." We have seen this all before. I am committed to being a force of good, to not fall to despair and fear, and I turn to queer history for inspiration and direction. In the words of World War II resistance worker Claude Cahun, "My role was to embody my own revolt and accept, at the proper moment, my destiny, whatever it may be." There are fascists marching on DC with police escorts. These same fascist groups who paper our lampposts with propaganda. Hell is here. This battle cannot be won by legislation alone. Anyone who suggests otherwise is lying. Let us seize our futures through collaboration and building resilient communities. Reject representation from those complicit in abusing us. Let us all embody our own revolts and fight in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make sure before I offer my words that I thank the timers. Thank you for doing this. We appreciate it. And thanks again to News-Gazette and League of Women Voters and NAACP. We really appreciate this. Thanks for your work. You know, it's 2020. We've been waiting for this. We've been waiting for this since November 9th of 2016, right? This is our chance to make things better. I'm excited that 2020 is finally here. You know, I've spent about 2.5 years out on the road around the 13th district listening to voters and building a foundation that we are going to build on now so that when we wake up on November 4th of 2020, that not only do we have a Democrat in the White House, but we have a Democrat in the 13th district. And we're going to do it by working together. I believe that we can protect our health care. I believe that we deserve a livable world. I believe in the equality of all of us. I believe that we can pass common sense gun legislation like universal background checks. I believe that by working together that we can flip this seat in 2020. We almost did it. We almost did it in 2018. We came within less than 1% of getting this seat flipped. So what I'm asking you tonight is not only for your vote and for your support, I'm asking you to take on this mission, because this is what we're on in 2020. We are on a mission to reach as many Democrats around the 13th district as we possibly can, to talk to them, to listen to them, to remind them that everything that we care about is at stake in 2020. So I'm ready for this. I'm ready to fight. I hope you're ready to fight too. I hope you're ready to knock doors, make phone calls. Let's get her done. Let's get it done in 2020.
Thank you both for your input today.
Well, thank you again.
Okay, thanks.
We're going to take a short break in order to set up for the next forum, which is County Board District 6.
Good evening. I'm Peggy LaFrance of the Champaign County NAACP. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, NAACP, and the News-Gazette, I welcome you to tonight's second candidate forum. Our candidates are for County Board District Number 6, Dr. Charles Young and DeShawn Williams. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement. I will then ask questions submitted by the audience, and candidates will each have 1 minute to answer these questions. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Candidates will kindly refrain from any negative attacks on the other candidate, will not mention the other candidate by name, and will speak only to what they plan to do if elected to office. For you in the audience, we hope that you have questions for the candidates. There are people distributing and collecting cards for your questions. Shall we begin? DeShawn?
Yes.
Go ahead. You can, I'm sorry.
He deferred to me first.
Yeah, I think Dr. Young was first.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Test 1, 2, I guess we on here. Good evening, and thank you, League of Women Voters and the News-Gazette and the NAACP Champaign County branch for hosting this great forum again. And let me say that I am a proud lifetime NAACP member forever. So the struggle goes on. We are 36 days away from the March 17, 2020 primary election day. And it has become very, very contentious when facing your own Democratic Party and family member. So my campaign literature out there says, re-elect me, Dr. Charles Young, Tuesday, March 17th, for the Champaign County Board District 6 position, because I am from Champaign, Urbana, born and raised all of my life, and I know the Twin City and the county very well. I am no stranger to this community nor the county. Plus, I have the experience. I'm already serving on the county board since 2018. While on the county board, I am the policy, personnel, and appointment chairperson. I am also the Democratic caucus vice chairperson too. A family man married to 32 years, 3 adult children, and 1 granddaughter. I have attended the Urbana schools, Parkland College, and a graduate and alum of the great University of Illinois. I am retired from the U of I after 31 years of service. I have over 20 years of local political experience. I am not a traditional politician, but a thinker and an intellectual. I'm always thinking outside the box of politics. I am a fighter for social justice and civil rights issues, a fighter for people rights, a fighter for pro-union rights, a fighter for pro-life, a fighter for human rights, and I love diversity. Humanity is always first, and I promise low taxes and will save you plenty of money in your pocket. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to tonight's forum.
Mr. Williams.
Awesome. Yeah, I started out, I told Charles I didn't have anybody to jump up with signs or anything, so he didn't have anything to worry about as far as that was concerned. But I'd like to first thank the League of Women Voters and the News-Gazette, as well as the NAACP for this opportunity, for this amazing platform, and also thank my opponent, Mr. Young, as well. I'm honored to be in front of you all. My name is DeShawn Williams. I am running for County Board in District 6. I am a husband to my beautiful wife, Tracy, and father to our 2 amazing children. I'm Assistant Vice President for Busey Bank. I attend the Champaign Church of Christ, in which we are active in feeding our kids programs within Champaign County. I'm a board member for 40 North, as well as the planning committee member for the Money Smart Financial Literacy, which is through the University of Illinois Extension. Some of you may know me from the musical scene as well, as recently as singing with Mike Ingram at the Songs Don't Kill People Charity Fund fundraiser that was held by the Moms Demand Action, as well as some other charity concerts within the community. I'm running because as much as I love our district and this community, there's still room for improvement. Our poverty rate is much higher than similar communities in Illinois. Our jail is falling apart, and it's filled with people who have yet to be proven guilty, yet they can't afford bail for themselves. Last year we had our highest rate of shootings within the last 5 years, and in general people don't seem to know about the county board and what the county board does. So those are issues for me and to me, and they're important to myself and the district. I believe we can do better. So tonight I would like to talk about solutions to those problems, and have a vision, for the county board and how we can, make that work and make the county board real to people within our community again. So before I get the red sign, I will stop. Thank you.
Mr. Williams, many people do not know in which county board district they live. Can you describe the geographic boundaries of your district?
Sure. Yeah. So to put it in simple terms, you're from South Duncan to Kirby. So you're in that square. So South Duncan to Kirby, to South Prospect, West Vine up to Neal, back up to Bradley, to Prospect, to Bloomington Road, to Mattis, and then basically back up. So it's a big rectangle that you're on the outskirts of and within in that rectangle there, just for simplicity standpoint.
Mr. Young, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's pretty much it. It might not be a rectangular, but more of a square shape, I think, with some of the jig jags up there. But also our district is socially and economically diverse, is very, very huge. So we have a lot of different class that's located in District 6, from low class to middle class to high class. And like I said, it's very diverse. And yeah, it's very, very huge. So that's pretty much it.
Mr. Young, what is your top priority if elected to county board?
So my top priority is I like to save money for the county, and we are in the process of a new government. that's been born in 2018. We have this county executive in position. I think that's a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's $120,000 that this individual position is getting. And I think is a waste of taxpayer dollars, an unnecessary political position to be in. I'm all about revising and reforming and redoing our budget. So that's one of the main objectives that I would like to hopefully revise. I'm into a lot of R's, and the R's stand for revise, revision, rewrite, redo. That's what I do. I'm a policy person. And if I see certain things that's not benefiting the people of the constituents, the people, it's time to revise and change some things. So that's one of my top priorities, along with revising a bunch of policies as well.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
A young man by the name of Marcel, he spoke at the Criminal Justice Forum back in January, I believe. He talked about lack of opportunities within the community that kind of put him at risk to falling victim, to some of the ways, within the community. His story resonated with me personally because, some of in middle school, I had a middle school teacher tell me that I would be dead or in jail by the time I was 21. He said that, in a sense to probably scare me, which, ironically it did. But, I also realized that he had said that to the students and things that looked like myself. So myself, giving is a priority for me is giving individuals like Marcel and people like myself that I see at that age more opportunities to succeed instead of being put in a box due to whatever their circumstances are.
Mr. Williams, if elected to County Board in November as Democratic nominee for your district, do you commit to caucus with your fellow Democratic members of the board and to vote with the majority of the Democratic caucus in selecting the board chair?
Yeah, I think that, we can maybe all agree. I wouldn't be running as a Democrat, if I didn't intend to vote like one and work with my fellow, Democratic board members. I don't believe a candidate should be seeking the nomination, if their answer is anything other than yes. Obviously, we're all individuals, and as far as our thought process is concerned, and we all have the right to kind of have our own say-so. But I'm running as a Democrat because, I want to fight arm in arm with the individuals that I'm representing and the individuals that got me elected in the first place. So.
Mr. Young.
So for the most part, I probably would end up voting for a Democratic person for the position. However, we have a nonpartisan county board, and that's how it's ran. And when you're on the inside, sometimes you have to reach across the aisle and compromise and do census with your colleagues. So I'm just going to be honest, depending on the person who it is, because like I said, once you actually establish within the government, you now become nonpartisan, and that means you work together for the whole county, for the benefit for all people, and not just for a particular party. But I'm quite honest, you got some funny acting people within the party, so I'm just more straightforward because I look at things more humane and more human-like as opposed to politics. I don't believe in politics because I believe it's more politics. So I'm looking at people first, and that's how I form my ideas and thoughts.
Mr. Young, what are the most important issues facing your county board district, and how will you address them?
So right now we dealing with the jail issue. That's really huge. As I continue to do town hall meetings and talk to my constituents, they are really concerned about the downtown county jail, which is in 3 situations right now that we can go forward with. 1, we can either demolish it. 2, we can end up like either rent it out and find another space for it, or we can consolidate. Add it on to the satellite jail. I don't too much care for building bigger jails, maybe minimizing the amount of space that we put on to the satellite because I'm more into people first. I like to build up people first, and I believe you incarcerate people, educate people, I should say, first, and then maybe we can minimize as many people as being locked up in jail. So I don't too much support the building another county jail, if not a big one, because it's too expensive and it's cost too much to keep them up and to maintain.
I'm sorry,
Thank
can
you,
you,
Mr. Williams.
can you repeat the
question?
question?
What are the most important issues facing your county board district, and how will you address them?
I mean, as an elected, elected official, my priorities, as Mr. Young said, is, as my constituents, priorities, as I've been knocking doors, something that I have, come across is, individuals, the residents, they're unaware of the county board and kind of what it does and who represents them. And I think that's of importance. Because they need to be able to know who they can go to if they're struggling with some type of mental state, as far as what they're wanting in the community, they have an idea of that person they can go to. A part of that plan is to make the county board real, to the communities within our district. In general, people aren't aware, of what the county board does. And to be more specifically, the shootings that have taken place, over the last year or so has happened in our district. So, as far as, the statement that was made about, blind instructions, it has nothing to do with blind instructions, but more so the fact that I have 2 individual kids that are under the age of 5 that live in this district as well, so.
Mr. Young,
Mr. Young, that's my name.
Champaign County has a severe poverty problem. Our rates exceed the national and state averages. How will you alleviate poverty at the county board?
So by trying to alleviate the poverty at the county level is definitely partnering with different agencies and different institutions within the district, within the community, whether it be within the schools or some other business. We must partner and then help fund that partnership along with trying to eradicate the problem of poverty. Like I said earlier, I don't pretty much support building buildings unless you're gonna build a building such as like a 24-hour shelter. So some of these people can go to that accommodate them for like 24-hour shelters. Having 24-hour shelters where you have social workers, you have case workers, you have management, you have psychological workers in there, psychologists, I should say, workers in there to help maintain these people. So definitely by collaborating with some of the community stakeholders to make this work out better and definitely continue to educate people.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
In all honesty, it kind of goes back to one of my earlier statements, supporting the development, of individuals who find themselves fighting against the current, to help them kind of prevent, themselves from falling into the river in the first place. I agree, with Mr. Young. We do need to find a solution, to building programs, not jails. I had an opportunity even today, to be a part of the READY program, mentoring, and one thing that I had the conversation with 2 young men individually that had poverty issues, but it was due to the circumstances. So their mind frame had already been kind of programmed to think that this is the way of life, this is what they have to do. And I feel that if we can figure out a way, some type of programming, whatever it takes to ensure that their mind frames are able to change, I think that'll change the future of what they have and what they can, aim for, so.
Mr. Williams, Champaign County has opportunities to combat the climate crisis. The solar farm near St. Joe, for example. Do you support this project?
In all honesty, that is, I'll be perfectly clear, that is a statement that, I haven't read much on. But I'll say this, as far as my process to finding that answer, is the same process that I would have, if I was elected, and that involves, sitting down, understanding the reasoning behind, the situation, talking to the voters, and working with my colleagues on the board, to find a solution that makes sense. So I don't want to, answer a question without the proper education, so.
Thank you. Mr. Young?
So in addition what Mr. Williams said, St. Joe and no rural area also, they need energy too as well. So any way to try to better those rural areas that's necessary with the essential needs that they need, then I'm all the way for it. But also we may need to consult with some kind of legal advisor someone who is an expert in this area when it comes down to solar farm.
Thank you. Mr. Young, should downtown jails be closed? If so, when? What do you do with inmates, programs?
So with the downtown jail situation, I toured there twice before, and it's pretty bad because it's overcrowded, and you have a lot of people that's there that have a lot of mental health issues. You got more people, more petty crime issues, inmates that's there as opposed to high crime or criminals over there. So it's just another booking hotel place to take people off the streets and put them in there. I think what they need to do is, once again, as I said earlier, try to find a way to thoroughly analyze and get to the root cause to why these people is over there in the county jail, these type of people that don't really need to be over there. Little small petty crimes that they may do, like they may have anger management problems, they may end up stealing, they may do little small petty thing, they just throw them over there. So I don't think that's right, I don't think that's correct, but once again, some kind of 24-hour service to have the people that's in there and separate those people, then add a little small addition to the satellite for the high crime criminals, because there's only a small amount of high crime criminals over there, according to the data and research I have done.
Mr. Williams?
I will say that I agree with that research. It's clear that there's, an obvious safety hazard. They're both for the inmates as well as the personnel working within the facility. Maintaining the status quo is irresponsible and unacceptable. But I do believe that some level of updating and upgrading is necessary in the long haul, as Mr. Young said. But the idea of a solution to that problem being a $40+ million new jail, I don't agree and support that. I agree in the sense of, that there is a need to maybe, divert some of that money, towards the development of, mental health cases or something to that extent, dramatically reducing that jail population, seeing as though I think it was like 85% of the individuals in jail are simply there because they can't afford bail. And that's uncalled for. So, just the establishing of some type of program to help reestablish individuals back into society. Sorry.
Mr. Williams, what will you do to ensure that people with disabilities have access to real work, pay, and community-based support?
That's an awesome question. In all honesty, I will say this. I can speak from a personal standpoint on that. When I was younger, I too had a learning disability. I was diagnosed with a short attention span. So I understand the importance of programs. I understand the importance of individuals within the community that's supporting you, that's there for you for more than just wanting to put you into a box, right? So I've been able to utilize that diagnosis of short attention span to be able to be a vice president of one of the largest banks at 33 years old. At the same time, I've owned my own company at 33 years old. I've learned to utilize the short attention span so that I can do multiple tasks and do them well and be successful at it. So.
Mr. Young?
So in addition to what Mr. Williams said, I agree with everything that he said there, but people with disabilities, they have needs too. So I'm into equal opportunity. I think, once again, I'm looking at things from a more humane perspective. There's federal and state laws that accommodate people. ADA, I think, American with Disability Act, yes, that's them, that accommodate these people with disabilities. So by any means necessary, if I have to be there or implement something for people with disabilities, then so be it. So I'm all the way for it and not against it.
Okay. Mr. Young, what unique abilities or experiences would you bring to the board?
So once again, like I said, currently I'm on the county board. I've been there since 2018. I am the chair of the policy personnel and appointment, and I'm also the vice chair of the caucus. And my role is instrumental because I'm always, and I don't know, I like doing research a lot, so I'm constantly researching things, revising things, making things better. If anything, I'm more of a people person, and I try to be more humane with the space that I use and constantly stay in touch with my constituents. I'm constantly in communication with them, and I'd like to bring them to the forefront and constantly talk to them and bring some of them ideas back to the county board, as opposed to getting on a board and then it becomes so politicized and people start having these different ideas and to how things should operate, how they should work. And I think a form of education is really good. I think a lot of people need to be educated, develop more professional development, continuing education programs within the county board, and constantly, like I said, just constantly be in communication with my constituents and the people who put me in office.
As far as I'm concerned, you know, I tell people all the time, I'm doing things now, you know, so it's not a matter of me waiting to get voted in, contrary to some belief. I'm a part of, as I said, I'm a part of the 40 North, you know, board, which, you know, we're responsible for bringing events and things of that nature to the community in the summertime to give the community, you know, something to do. I'm a part of, you know, the financial literacy development, which, as I said, our main focus is people within urban areas that for whatever reason can't, you know, obtain the things that people outside of that area, you know, have the ability to do. I'm doing all of those things now. So, I mean, as far as what my ability would be, is just for me to be able to, Lord willing, wake up another day and continue on with the fight that I've, you know, kind of established already. You know, again, I have an opportunity to work with the READY program that their focus is at-risk youth, you know, and so I feel as though if we can tackle them before they get to a space of being able to go to the jail, then we'll be off to a good start.
Mr. Williams, what is your position on the new county executives structure? If opposed, what can you do about it?
Well, from my research, the county executive, you know, position in itself, it's a weird position, you know, for what it seems like. Because if I'm not mistaken, it was an attempt, you know, from the Republican group, you know, to kind of overshadow the county board because they weren't able to you know, obtain enough elections, basically. Unfortunately for them, it backfired. But, you know, now the Democrats are in charge of a position, you know, whose creation they opposed in the first place. You know, so, I mean, as far as what they do, you know, they're, and I won't say that, you know, but I will say this, you know, I hope that, you know, I would be able to meet and have, you know, the conversation necessary to make the right move. I'll say that much.
Mr. Young,
Can you repeat that question?
what is your position on the new county executives structure? If opposed, what can you do about it?
So I've been on there for the last year, and I'm at the point right now I don't too much agree with it because I was opposed it from the get-go. I thought it was, once again, as I said earlier, it was a waste of taxpayer dollars, $120,000 for this unnecessary position to take place. So in the meantime, and I'm just telling you guys, I'm just being truthful, the person that has this position is really dictating her executive power, which I do not like, and we constantly into battle because you say one thing outside to the people, but then you get inside and you switch. So I'm constantly revising and rewriting some things right now as I speak, and I was quite successful because I rewrote 2 policies to benefit the people of our community to make things more inclusive and more transparent. And and maybe in the future, perhaps we can even, a little secret I'm telling, maybe minimize the board because the board is too big. I would find ways to cut and make some, you know, cut costs, I should say, and maybe down to maybe 9 members and redo the zoning.
Mr. Young, what is something the board passed during the last term that you might change today?
What they passed the last term, well, boy, that's tough. That's tough. What? I think the process of how they go about with the appointments. So the person position don't really allow us as a party and myself as a policy leader to really put our support and true ideas, right, behind how the appointment process is set up. So in other words, so what they do, you have all these appointments throughout the county that people serve on these boards and commissions. And they end up, I mean, they pass that. I sometimes feel lonely because I end up having to reject those appointments by myself. I don't like that process because, once again, the person who's in position is dictating how we should do one thing. And most important, so I have to help rewrite some of those policies so that the person would not just take advantage of the people on there and have this executive power and do what the person want to do. And there have been several past legislation or resolutions.
Mr. Williams.
I mean, in all honesty, the county board is responsible for, for multiple tasks, within the community. So, I mean, unless you're there and on the board, that is, as Mr. Young said, that is a tougher question. I do know that there has been issues, within, the board, as far as the county executive is concerned, as far as some of the members, even within, with the chair as well. And that's, from what I understand, those are some understandable, arguments, to that extent. And I'd assume, that had I had the opportunity, that I would have been a part of some of those decision changes.
Thank you. That was our last question, so now we will have your closing statement, Mr. Williams.
Go first? All right. As mentioned, the status quo it's not working. People are unaware of what the county board does. And in talking with the voters in my district, a large part of that is because they didn't know who represented them. I'm the type of individual that is willing to put in the work and make sure that my constituents know me and that they know the board, what the board does and what it can do for them. We need to leave the old mentality about voting behind. And in 2020, we need to make sure that we are heard and represented correctly. For my part, as far as I'm concerned, of me running and representing you, I can promise you that you will get someone who will never pretend to know more or be more than I am. I'll not make decisions, as you've seen earlier today, decisions about things that I'm uneducated on. So I will always devote the time to learning the board business. As we've seen, that's not done enough, and we have great caucus members who are well educated in the fields that they are in to help other individuals. I would love to add my financial background to that equation. I'm a man of faith who believes that there's still opportunity for unification in our society, and I want to be a part of that fight for change that we all agree is necessary. And understand this, my reason for running, it runs, beyond a personal vendetta or a personal desire to be a part of the board, but it's for the innocence I see in my children's eyes when I look at them and for the next generation. So thank you, guys.
Mr. Young.
Okay, thank you all again for allowing this forum to take place tonight. Since my time on the county board in 2018, I have been seen as a controversial figure because I had invested more time in developing human capital and people rights than bricks and mortar and infrastructure issues. I did not choose politics, politics chose me. I came out swinging and hitting the ground running by revising some of the county government major policies successfully that benefited the community people, my constituents and voters, and not the county board members inside sneaky and deceptive ways. If you want a new or traditional local politician that's part of the status quo or even part of a corrupt system, then vote for them. But if you want someone experienced and different and a fighter for truth and justice and fairness, then vote for me. We don't need any more local political leaders or political ideas, but instead we need more other leaders and other ideas. We need more do the right thing leaders and ideas than ordinary political leaders. There's an old saying that goes like this: thinkers and intellectual that's on the ground level, everyday grassroots people level, find answers and solve real world problems. Federal, state, and local politicians don't. With that being said, for more information about my candidacy, visit my Facebook page at Charles Young for Champaign County Board, District 6, The Other Leader. Thank you.
Thank you both for your input today. Good evening. I'm Peggy LaFrance of the Champaign County NAACP. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, NAACP, and the News-Gazette, I welcome you to tonight's final candidate forum. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for an opening statement. I will then ask questions submitted by the audience, and candidates will each have 1 minute to answer these questions. At the end, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Candidates will kindly refrain from any negative attacks on the other candidate, will not mention the other candidate by name, and will speak only to what they plan to do if elected to office. For you in our audience, we hope that you have questions for the candidates. There are people distributing and collecting cards for you. Please raise your hands if you are collecting and distributing cards. Shall we begin? We will get started with Ms. Mary King.
Hi, I'm Mary King. I'm a lifelong resident of Illinois, having grown up in rural western Kankakee County, attended university in Chicago, and 16 years ago, I moved to Champaign County to work at what was then the Illinois Transportation Archaeological Research Program. Currently, I am a research archaeobotanist with the Illinois State Archaeological Survey and have lived in District 10 for 12 years. Even while working full-time and helping to raise my stepson, I've made a point of volunteering to support Democrats and progressive causes at the local, state, and national levels, including with the fight to save the Champaign County Nursing Home, Daniel Biss's gubernatorial primary campaign, and the county board primary and general campaigns of Dr. Tanisha King Taylor, former District 10 county board member. Knocking hundreds of doors and spending many more hours phone and text banking for progressive Democrats has been a great privilege. Even so, when Dr. King Taylor asked me to apply to fill her seat on the board because I shared her vision of community-focused leadership, changing from volunteer to potential candidate was a big step out of my comfort zone. I'm a researcher, someone who is most comfortable digging a site or spending hours doing microscope work. So you can imagine what an honor it was to receive the recommendation from the District 10 Precinct Committee persons for the appointment to Dr. King Taylor's seat. When the current board chair decided to ignore the judgment of both the PCs and the majority of his caucus, I felt it necessary to run in this primary in order to give the voters of District 10 a choice. If the state of Champaign County could be summed up in 2 words, it would be deferred maintenance. The county sheriff's letter to the February 4th County Facilities Committee meeting presented the state of the crumbling downtown jail and inadequate satellite facility in stark terms. While it is clear a plan to renovate the satellite jail must move forward, this board cannot fail to capitalize on the best opportunity it will ever have to address the needs of the future rather than putting another Band-Aid on the mistakes of the past. The numbers are clear. At least half of all people being held by the county at any given time are awaiting trial while unable to make low-dollar amounts of bail. Even though they have not been convicted of any crime, the county is paying $110 a day to hold them, and this incarceration is potentially costing inmates their jobs, housing, and transportation.
Good evening. My name is Connie Dillard-Myers, and I too would like to thank the News-Gazette, the NAACP, and the lights on. Do I get to start over? Hi, my name is Connie Dillard-Myers, and I'm here tonight because I was invited by the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the News-Gazette. I am running for District 10. County board seat. I was appointed to the seat in October under controversial conditions, but I have served and served well. Why should you vote for me? Well, I bring a plethora of experience, a fresh perspective to the county board, a strong democratic voice, diversity and inclusiveness, excellence and integrity. I'm an experienced precinct committee person and has been for the past 5 years. I'm a person who listens to understand, not to argue, fuss, and fight. I worked at the university library for 30 years. I retired from the university. I also graduated from Urbana High School. I went to Parkland College. I graduated from the University of Illinois Geis College of Business and Eastern Illinois School of Technology. After working at the university, I worked at CMT Ventures, which is a small startup here in downtown Champaign. I worked for the U.S. Navy, and I contracted 1 year for Amdocs. I am a multitasker. I am a very strong person who will not be deterred. My goal is to win the 2020 primary and the November election, and to serve the people of District 10. I've brought along information and yard signs about my campaign, and I will be available after this for any questions that anyone has.
Ms. Dillard-Myers, many people do not know which county board district they live in. Can you describe the geographic foundations of your district?
Yes, my district is bordered on the south by Old Church Road, Savoy, runs all the way through Savoy and Urbana. And on the east, the old Cemetery Road. And on the north, it's kind of jagged, but it goes down Washington Avenue, then it jets over to Main, and then it goes over past beyond University Avenue in the little area where Walgreens and the U.S. Armory over in that area, just a little bit. And then it goes all the way west to Race, but then sort of juts back around the mall, Vine Street, then it goes back up to Race. Actually, it goes a little bit beyond Race, but it's basically a triangle with a little jet out over when it goes beyond University Avenue.
Thank you.
And that was one of the first questions I had when I started this process. Exactly where is my district? And I actually had to find my precinct too, which is within the district.
Thank you. Ms. King, would you like to add anything to that?
Nope, Connie's got a map, she's got it covered.
Okay. Ms. King, what is your top priority if elected to county board?
So my very top priority is addressing the issue of the facilities issues we have, namely the jail. And there's indications right now that the state is rightly moving away from the failed punishment model. There was a bill just signed into law by Governor Pritzker, has eliminated suspending licenses for most non-moving violations, like paid parking tickets, and reinstated licenses for those who've lost them. And just in this weekend's News-Gazette, one of the top 4 reasons for arrest in Champaign County last year was driving on revoked or suspended licenses, and it was the top charge for arrestees in 2019. So when we go to, renovate the satellite jail, we need to keep in mind that if the average number of inmates right now is 170, and one of the main reasons why people are being charged is eliminated, that number will reduce. So if the satellite jail has currently 182 beds and the $47 million proposal would bring that up to 283, it's still lower than the number of beds that we have now between the downtown and satellite jails, but we do need to reduce that further.
Ms. Dillard-Myers,
Could you repeat the question, please?
what is your top priority if elected to county board?
Well, it's definitely the jail situation. From a professional standpoint, as a business analyst, I think there needs to be a needs assessment. Anyone who's a business analyst will know needs assessment is going to go in and find out exactly what your problem is. But I think we need to go back to the grassroots problem. Reading the sheriff's report, over 55% of the population in the county jail was black when we only comprised of 13%, and I'm up in that. Really, it's something like 12.6% of the population. So it really is systemic of racism, systemic of slavery, systemic of a failed school system. It's not just the county's problem. It's an old African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. So this starts before the child even enters school because they're not getting the proper parenting. Maybe the parent doesn't have proper skills. So this is one of those approaches where it's going to take a village, not just the county board to solve. We need to stop the kids from going into the prison system.
Ms. Dillard-Myers, if elected to the county board in November as Democratic nominee for your district, do you commit to caucus with your fellow Democratic members of the board and to vote with the majority of the Democratic caucus in selecting the board chair?
I tend to caucus with my Democratic fellow members as to who I choose. I'm going to get that from my constituents in District 10. Nobody's going to tell me how to vote. The only way I'm going to vote is Democratic.
Ms. King.
So on every issue, I will exercise my best judgment about what best serves the county in District 10. I will listen carefully and with an open mind to my constituents, to other members of the Democratic caucus, and to the rest of the board. That being said, the choice of a board chair affects how the entire board is organized to address every issue from that point forward. So the choice we face is not who is best for the position in the abstract, but who can unite the caucus to advance its vision. Within the caucus, I will advocate vigorously for the caucus to support the person I consider to be the best choice, but once the caucus settles on its nominee, I will respect the will of the caucus and support its choice to the full board.
Ms. King, what are the most important issues facing your county board district, and how will you address them?
I think one of the most important issues facing my district in particular is our problems with violence within this district. The death in Urbana this year was actually at the head of the street I live on. So once again, this goes back to the question of the facilities and how we are addressing, the many ways in which we're failing people in this community, failing to give them opportunities. It's not stopping the, school to jail pipeline. We have to, build programs. We need to build programs for people in this community.
Ms. Dillard-Myers,
Could you repeat the question, please?
what are the most important issues facing your county board district, and how will you address them?
I think urbanization and the violence that's coming along with it was one of the bigger issues, and I think that's going to be an intergovernmental, it's going to have to be solved intergovernmentally, because most of it's concentrated in the cities of Champaign and Urbana. The county represents the board represents the whole entire counties. So the board's going to have to get with the cities of Champaign and Urbana, where most of the violence is at, and a little bit in Rantoul, and work with it. But I think urbanization is something that's creeping upon us, and I've lived in this community for 45 years, and I do have to say I came from St. Louis. And when I first came here, that was one of the good things about being here. It wasn't so urbanized. We saw grass, we saw trees, you saw butterflies and bees. Well, I began to see here in Champaign-Urbana some of the urbanization that I saw in St. Louis while I was fleeing. It's coming here, the violence. When I first moved here, nobody ever got murdered in Champaign-Urbana. That's not the case today. I think last year we had probably enough for fill both of our hands and start with some of our feet too.
Ms. Dillard-Myers, Champaign County has a severe poverty problem. Our rates exceed the national and state averages. How would you alleviate poverty at the county board?
I don't know if I, as an individual, could alleviate poverty at the county board. It would take me and all of my county colleagues to work together, and then I think we would still be limited without some dollars. It would take money. Some of the programs that we have, like Head Start, is good start, but Head Start probably could be improved. I'm quite sure the director of Head Start could use some more money. It's going to take money, and we need a different atmosphere. The Trump administration has been cutting every social program that they can. And if we don't stop that erosion, that Republican attack on society, they almost seem like communists to me, then I don't know if I, as an individual, will be able to do anything but help my next-door neighbor feed their kid or something like that.
Thank you. Ms. King?
I completely agree with Ms. Dillard-Myers that we need to stop the Trump erosion of our social programs. And one of the ways we can do that through the board is by helping to pass budgets that fund things like the one-door crisis response model to address mental health, that we should not have homeless or indigent persons seeking arrest to have shelter or to receive medical care, that we need to greater respond to things like the lack of affordable housing in our community, and there are things the board can do through passing budgets for the programs they already fund for mental health, and that to alleviate these issues.
Thank you. Ms. King, Champaign County has opportunities to combat the climate crisis. The solar farm near St. Joe, for example. Do you support this project?
I really support this project. So I mentioned earlier that I grew up in western Kankakee County, and my parents, my father didn't only work as a union chemist at a plant in Kankakee, he also farmed with his father until 2005, and they're still farming today. And the markets they're facing right now are driving people like my parents, like my family, out of farming. And the 150-megawatt photovoltaic solar farm here in Champaign County is an opportunity for farmers and landowners to harvest energy instead of commodity crops that are in flux, and because of Trump's trade wars, they have lost their markets. So I'm very, very much in support of this.
Ms. Dillard-Myers?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Champaign County has opportunities to combat the climate crisis. The solar farm near St. Joe, for an example. Do you support this project?
Yes, I do. I support any solar initiative because I think that that's going to help drive the cost of energy down, therefore helping everyone. It's also a good environmental move. It is also giving opportunities to small companies like the company that you're speaking of.
Ms. Dillard-Myers, should downtown jails be closed? If so, when? What to do with inmates' programs?
Well, are you asking me from a professional standpoint or from a personal standpoint? Because from a personal standpoint, I say shut it down today. I think it's a safety issue for the inmates, the staff. I've been promised a tour. I haven't received one yet, but the description I've gotten, I think it should be shut down immediately as soon as possible, and I don't know why it hasn't been done already. Like I said before, there needs to be a professional consulting firm coming in here to do a needs assessment for the county jail situation. So whereas we go about fixing it, it gets fixed right, and it doesn't just get moved to 2 decades down the road. They're still kicking this can down, that road. So.
Thank you. Ms. King?
It seems to me from the sheriff's report at the facilities meeting that the downtown jail is a hazard to both the inmates and to the people who work there. And one of the most important things we can do is to close it down, but we have to do so with keeping in mind that if the satellite facility has not been renovated, then the county will be paying thousands of dollars to house inmates elsewhere. So you cannot just close down one jail without making sure that there's already something in place to house the people we have now. And I'm very hopeful that in the near future there will be less people needing to be incarcerated because of bail reform and because of other reforms that are coming through the state right now. But we can't just close down the downtown jail without costing the county a lot of money.
Thank you. Ms. King, what would you do to ensure that people with disabilities have access to real work, pay, and community-based support?
This is something that's also kind of near and dear to my heart because a lot of people that I've volunteered with here doing democratic work are people who have been underserved because of having different abilities or other problems. So one of the biggest things we can do, once again, is to make sure that when we're helping to pass budgets, we're always thinking of how best we can serve people in this community. What are the needs? And that means listening to our constituents, addressing their needs, bringing that to the rest of the caucus, and then working together to find real solutions.
Thank you. Ms. Dillard-Myers?
Could you repeat the question?
What would you do to ensure that people with disabilities have access to real work, pay, and community-based support?
I would make sure that all of the policies and rules that's related to ADA is enforced to the max. I would support more situations like the Developmental Services Center out on Bradley Avenue that actually train and find work for people with disabilities. And I think that society is beginning to recognize that people with disabilities have value too. I just read a research article where actually people are looking for individuals who are autistic to do certain work, especially in statistics and computations, because they can focus, and they are good at that. So why not utilize their skills? So if we can find more research-based work for people with disabilities that suit their disabilities in the situation with the autistic people, I think that we should promote that too. And I think we should do more research in preventing disabilities, such as autism. So. But I think enforcement of the policies and rules and the laws that are already on the books would be a great help.
Thank you. Okay. This will be our last question. And this is for you, Ms. Dillard-Myers. What are you willing to do to increase diversity and inclusion on the county board?
Well, that's why I'm here. As an African-American who's lived in the community for 45 years, I've watched the board over the years. I'm a current events person. I had a teacher when I was in 3rd or 4th grade who impressed upon us that you should keep in touch with the current events in your environment. And I've seen 2 people who held the District 10 seat leave before it was over with. They had other priorities, that the district was not their priority. I think the last person who got elected only went to 2 or 3 meetings, was only in the position for less than a year, and knew they were leaving the community looking for work outside the community while they were running for the position. So I took upon myself to bring stability to District 10, because I've lived in District 10 for 15 years. I've lived in Champaign-Urbana, Champaign County for 45 years. As I stated earlier, I went to Urbana High School. I graduated Parkland College. I went to university. I went to EIU. I'm embedded in this community. I'm not going anywhere.
Thank you. Ms. King?
As a progressive, diversity is always something that is a goal of mine, and I know that I speak as a white cis-het woman, and I have a lot of privilege, and I'm always cognizant of that. But if we're talking about diversity on this board, it also has to be diversity not only of race, of gender, but of sexual orientation and of age. And I would like to add that, Dr. King Taylor was somebody who lived in this community for over a decade, and because of, opportunities, especially with people my age, I've been here for 16 years and I'm lucky. A lot of people my age, if you lose your job or if you're underemployed, you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice but to leave. So if we're talking about diversity, we're going to be losing the diversity of younger voices if running for board becomes something that you can only do if you're over 50.
Ms. King will have your closing statement.
Thank you. The blue wave in 2018 didn't happen in a vacuum. While Democrats were given a mandate by the people of Champaign County, it will have been in vain unless our elected officials are willing to create solid, accessible policies through collaborative decision-making and then communicate those policies to the public in a clear and concise manner. It is time for the Champaign County Board to transcend the national chaos and show what effective government looks like. I believe local government is about building relationships, which is why I've been out knocking doors and engaging with my neighbors. It is why every one of my yard signs, aside from the ones at Brookins, are in front of a residence I or one of my volunteers have personally visited. It is why I am ready and willing to put personality conflicts aside to stand with the rest of the Democratic caucus when it comes time to vote, because without a unified front, there is no way we can be effective. But most importantly, I want this era of local government to be one when a more just and equitable future in Champaign County became a reality. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the News-Gazette for organizing and hosting this forum. I hope, though, that the League of Women Voters is able to revisit the national level rule prohibiting a candidate who has responded to a forum in the affirmative from speaking if their challenger decides not to attend. The candidate who decided not to attend tonight's forum was recently appointed to the county board, once again over the recommendation of precinct committee persons, and I believe she owes the voters in her county board district, District 9, a thorough explanation of her actions. Thank you.
Ms. Dillard-Myers?
Well, the question was asked why I'm running. And like I said, I'm running because of lack of consistency. And even when the person was elected, they didn't even attend the meetings. When I was appointed to the position, one of the board members told me I would be watched. So among the board itself is a lack of inclusiveness. I bring inclusiveness and diversity. I have more time to devote to the board and the issues that are looming toward us. I have a business degree. I am a business analyst. I could do the needs assessment for the jail. I haven't heard anyone on the board or anyone in public say that there needs to be a needs assessment for the jail situation. Not only does there need to be a needs assessment, there needs to be some consultants. We need to see another city like ours have gone through this same thing, the things they had to deal with, the things that they were faced with, what they did right, what they did wrong. We need some action in Champaign County. We don't need divisiveness. We don't need people trying to exclude us. We don't need to be 55% of the jail population, but only 13% of the population in general. We need programs. We don't need a failed school system. This school system has been through dissent decrees. 10 years, they're back right where they started from. They don't care about black and brown people. White privilege is Champaign County, and if you're not in with the in crowd, then you're not included. I'm more for inclusiveness. Every county in every district in this county ought to have a voice, and it shouldn't be some clique that don't speak to you because you weren't their choice. Inclusiveness is what the county board needs, and inclusiveness is what I'll bring. I spoke to them even when they didn't speak to me, and even when they spoke for me, I didn't complain. I just told them they didn't need to do it because I was capable of doing it myself. Thank you, and everyone have a good evening.
Thank you to the candidates for your input tonight.
I'm going to have a couple of closing words. I'm Tricia Crowley, president of the Champaign County League of Women Voters. And there is another contested race in the county board level. It's County Board District 9. And people have asked questions about why the league is not presenting a forum for County Board District 9. The league presents forums, which are side-by-side questioning of candidates. It does not do interviews. The league's rules for forums have been developed over time based on our experience. One of our rules is that when there are only two persons in a forum, both must agree to appear, or that race will not be presented. We are certainly well aware that this puts each candidate in the position where he or she can prevent a televised forum. But the league is not going to be evaluating whether or not a candidate's excuse is good enough. It's a simple rule. If one of the two does not agree to appear, there will be no forum. In this case, the Democratic candidate for County Board District 9, Jennifer Straub, agreed to appear, and Democratic candidate Cynthia Fears declined to appear. Therefore, we are not presenting a forum for that race. And to conclude, I'd like to thank both of our co-sponsors, the NAACP and the News-Gazette, and particularly Minnie Pearl of the NAACP and Jim Russo from the News-Gazette. Yeah. I'd like to thank Peggy LaFrance for moderating tonight's forum. She did a great job under pressure, so thank you, Peggy. And to our excellent timekeepers, Michelle Sturgis and Michelle Coop. Great timekeeping. Coin flipper, Sarah Nixon. Question sorters, Holly Wiper, Rashima Dixon, and Kim Robertson. Question sorters, Kelly Lahanti, Minnie Pearson, and Crystal Northern. And particularly, Jonna Von Behrens, who arranged the whole thing. Thank you very much.